Cryptocurrencies are entering people's lives more and more every year. Some invest in them. Some store and transfer money in stablecoins. But it wasn't always like this. Just over 10 years ago, crypto was only used by a very small bunch of enthusiasts. And then 2013 happened and Bitcoin grew several dozen times. That bunch of enthusiasts got rich, and hundreds of thousands of people around the world began to wonder if they were missing their chance of the century. This is what our today's heroine took advantage of, who created the OneCoin cryptocurrency, convincing thousands of people that this is the new Bitcoin, and they should not miss the second chance to get rich doing nothing. In the end, it all culminated into one of the biggest scams, not only in the cryptocurrency industry, but in general. So if you are interested to know how the daughter of ordinary Bulgarian workers managed to steal several billion euros without going to jail, then meet Ruja Ignatova on the other side of the law. Ruja Ignatova was born on May 30, 1980 to Veski and Plamen Ignatov in Sofia, Bulgaria. Her father was educated as a mechanical engineer, and her mother worked as a kindergarten teacher. In 1986, Ruja had a brother Konstantin, and in 1990 the family moved to Germany and settled in a poor neighborhood in the small southwestern town of Schramberg. Bulgarian-born Ruja had an unusual accent as a child, oscillating between harsh German consonants and rhythmic Bulgarian sounds. Growing up, she sometimes said that the accent thus encapsulated two sides of her personality: the impulsive Bulgarian and the rational German. At school she did well, was top of her class, and brilliant in every subject. One teacher in Schramberg said she was the smartest student he had ever met. However, being the brightest child in the school was not easy, because her classmates considered her arrogant and aloof, and she preferred her parents or her studies to the company of her friends. At the age of 18, Ruja Ignatova won a prestigious scholarship to the University of Constance, one of the best universities in Germany, where she defended her doctoral thesis in law and took a distance learning course in economics at the University of Hagen. As in high school, she had interests beyond her years. For example, she was involved in politics and became a student representative of the center-right Christian Democratic Union Party. During her studies, the girl met Bjorn Strull, fell in love with him, and soon married. As before, her studies were easy. After Constance, she was accepted to Oxford University for a master's degree in European law. And always history repeated itself. Ruja was the best, the smartest, but aloof. She had a huge amount of ambition and friends and acquaintances. She always said that by 30 years she would become a millionaire. But time passed. Here she is already 28, and still no mountains of money. And she desperately wanted it, and could well become successful. But just success was not enough for her. She needed a financial triumph. In 2008, Ruja was back in her hometown and worked as a consultant in the prestigious American consulting company McKinsey & Company, which was considered almost the best job available at that time in Sofia. And Ruja herself liked this position because she had the whole world in front of her: stock prices, exchange rates, investment portfolios, and she controlled it all. The girl stood out among her colleagues and was one of those to whom one could write at any time of the day or night and almost instantly get an answer. Colleagues as well as fellow students at the university considered her aloof, mistaking her hard work and attention to detail for rudeness, while clients, on the contrary, found her charming and efficient. But the job wasn't paying enough for Ruja, and she decided to moonlight on the side, not quite legally. It was 2010. Somewhere in southern Germany in those years there was a factory, Waltenhofen Gussworks, which was run by a certain Carlos Gil and was on the verge of ruin. After trying to deal with the situation for a long time, the owner finally spit and decided to sell the company, and then spent months trying to find a buyer. No, it wasn't difficult. It was more difficult to find someone who cared about the workers, and for Carlos that was most important, because the problems at the factory had caused 60 of the 140 people to lose their jobs at the company, and the rest could be out of work in the near future. At the beginning of 2010, The factory was unexpectedly bought by a young woman and her father. The woman turned out to be Ruja Ignatova, and her father Playman was a man who had worked in a steel factory for many years. Ruja immediately made Carlos Gil feel at ease, and her impeccable resume, company forecasts, spreadsheets, etc. made a great impression on him. He almost agreed to sell the factory, but he was tormented by a single question: the fate of the workers. But Ruja dispelled these doubts, assuring him that the jobs would appear and the employees would be reinstated. The deal was made. Ruja offered more than 2 million euros for the plant, which she borrowed from a German bank, and used 2 blast furnaces owned by her and her father, worth almost 1 million euros, as collateral for the loan. These furnaces she and her father were eventually supposed to move and install in the factory. But this never happened. Whether the furnaces themselves were there, by the way, also remains a mystery. So in the spring of 2010, Ruja and Playman became co-owners of a steelworks in southern Germany. For the first few months, everything went as well as possible. Ruja sat in her office, dealing with the affairs of the factory. Mother Veska was Ruja's assistant, and Father Playman was usually in the workshops, watching the production and talking to the workers. But then the problems began. About a year later, one of the employees called Carlos and told him that Ruja had a consulting company she owned called Relacap, which she had hired and was paying herself out of factory money, and as a result, workers' wages were getting smaller. Carlos, who up to that point had not interfered with the new director, decided to talk to Ruja, but she explained that it was a small rebranding job, and it was okay. The employees were being paid to work after all. Gradually, working conditions began to deteriorate. Employees were asked to work overtime without pay. Invoices were ignored. Vacation money was cut. And one day Ruja claimed that her company car, a Porsche Cayenne, had allegedly been stolen during a trip to Bulgaria. Nor did the blast furnaces that Ruja and Playman had promised to bring from Bulgaria arrive. The plant was operating with outdated equipment, and new furnaces were badly needed to keep production going. But the weeks of waiting turned into months, and there was always some new excuse as to why it would be next week, next month. Carlos, who had started coming to the factory unannounced and demanding a meeting with Ruja, also began to insist that the furnaces be transported to the factory. But the new director replied rather rudely that he was meddling in the wrong business. Soon one of the workers called Carlos again and told him that the factory had been sold to an unknown businessman for only €1. Now the factory was finally doomed to close. For ruining the factory and manipulating the money, the woman had to face justice 6 years later, in 2016. On April 12, she appeared in the dock at the District Court of Augsburg and pleaded guilty to a felony, more specifically to willful breach of duty in case of insolvency, fraud, withholding and embezzlement of employees' wages, and breach of accounting duties. The judge sentenced Ruja to 14 months probation and a fine of €18,000, while Playman, who was absent from the trial, had to pay $12,000. Carlos considered this punishment insufficient, but there was nothing more he could do. Around the same time that Ruja bought out the factory, the consulting firm where the woman had previously worked closed down. Now she faced a choice: stay in Bulgaria or return to Germany, where not so long ago was bought real estate. The choice was made in favor of the country of birth, as Ruja later admitted that while she lived in Germany, she always lacked something, and the woman continued to develop in Bulgaria. In addition to money, Ruja has always been interested in fashion, and therefore she tried to go into the field of beauty, launching her own line of cosmetic products. She socialized with famous people in Sofia and attended their parties. For some time she worked in the largest investment firm in Bulgaria, which was headed by Svetlana Borislava. Eventually her efforts paid off, and by 2013 Ruja had become a recognizable face in urban fashion, business, and politics. But she was still haunted by a fear of unrealized potential, and while she now had a few business interests of her own, they weren't bringing in the kind of money Ruja wanted. So she began researching Bitcoin, which interested her when its price began to rise sharply. Observing the growing popularity of Bitcoin, a certain John N.J. decided to create his own Bitcoin and named it Bitcoin. However, instead of being bought and sold on currency exchange sites, this new Bitcoin was to follow the NLM model where people join, buy coins, and then sell the coins to other people, getting a percentage of it, and the commissions are similarly accumulated up through the levels, meaning the one at the very top gets a percentage of everyone at the very bottom. John N.G. started calling people he knew to find those who were interested in the idea. One of those people was Sebastian Greenwood, who was representing SiteTalk at the time. Sebastian was a born salesman. His bosses noticed this, so in 2011 he was already selling SiteTalk directly to investors across Europe. Sebastian left SiteTalk at the beginning of 2013 and with his former colleague Bjorn Thomas created his own company called Toa Group Cyprus, which however failed. Then they tried again, naming the project Lupium, and around this time he was contacted by John N.G. with an offer to join Bitcoin. John and Sebastian complemented each other perfectly. John was a bit older, hardworking, and organized, but he needed someone to excite the crowd, which Sebastian was great at. Greenwood met Ruja in November 2013 at a cryptocurrency seminar in Singapore, where Ignatova was one of the speakers. Ruja's idea itself wasn't very memorable to Sebastian, but he realized that the woman had a great understanding of finance. After the presentation, Sebastian approached her and introduced himself, offering to collaborate. Ruja was hired as Bitcoin's legal counsel. The woman did a great job, and Bitcoin did so well that Sebastian eventually closed his company Lupium. It's unclear at exactly what point Sebastian and Ruja decided to steal John N.J.'s idea, but the more they promoted Bitcoin, the more they realized they could do better without John's involvement. Starting in the early spring of 2014, the pair worked on Bitcoin all day and then met secretly every night to develop their own, improved version of the currency. This is how OneCoin began to emerge. Despite all his enthusiasm, Sebastian didn't know how to start an NLM company from scratch, and that's when he and Ruja decided to turn to one of Sebastian's acquaintances, a man named Juha Pariala. Juha had already been working with NLM for a long time and had built up a large network of promoters in Asia that he could, in theory, attract to OneCoin. Juha contacted Ruja, and for 40 minutes she tried to explain to him in simple language the technology behind cryptocurrencies. She said that all cryptocurrencies run on specialized software, the blockchain, that is, an immutable database that is updated every few minutes. This is the so-called diary of the coin, where all transactions made by anyone anywhere using the cryptocurrency are published. And thanks to technology, no previous entry can be deleted. After talking to Ruja, Juha didn't understand much, but his task was not to understand OneCoin, but to sell it. Sebastian promised that Juha would be the main promoter in the pyramid scheme, and that meant he would receive commissions from almost everyone who invested after him. Juha agreed, though he continued to understand little. After a while, the newfound colleagues agreed on two main ways to make money. First, anyone who sold OneCoin should receive a 10% commission for direct sales. Second, promoters should also receive a 10% commission for volume of business, based on all sales of those they invite to join. It was simple and lucrative. In addition, there was another option that was the most important of all. At some point in the near future, OneCoin was going to go on a cryptocurrency exchange where it could be sold for real money, just like Bitcoin. And just like that, OneCoin's value would have to rise, which would differentiate it from the products of other NLM companies. That is, the company was aiming at two types of hamsters at once. The first one expected to make money by attracting other hamsters. The second hoped for the new coming of Bitcoin and a multiple increase in the value of the coin when it went public. By late summer 2014, the trio had agreed on a basic business model and sales scheme. OneCoin was to be the next Bitcoin, sold through NLM, and was to continue to evolve. While Sebastian and Juha finalized the plan, Ruja set to work setting up the corporate structure of the new firm, websites, recruitment, company incorporation, and so on. She also renamed several of her old companies and put them under the management of her mother. Some time later, Irina Dilkinska was hired as OneCoin's head of legal and regulatory affairs, responsible for ensuring the firm's compliance with various laws and regulations related to cryptocurrencies and NLM. In June 2014, Ruja registered the domain name www.onecoin.eu and indicated that OneCoin was the next Bitcoin. With the corporate structure and sales plan in place, Ruja and Sebastian needed to permanently shut down Bitcoin, but to do so in a way that would not immediately raise suspicion. In the same month that Ruja registered the OneCoin website, she and Sebastian flew to Hong Kong for a big Bitcoin sales conference, where the woman presented investors with the idea of exchanging the coins for shares in an investment fund that had been set up called the Cryptorial Investment Trust. It was most likely just a hoax to distract John from the truth, as Sebastian and Ruja were on the verge of launching their own competing project, and the only thing left to do to launch the cryptocurrency was to create the blockchain that would power the currency. The difficulty was that neither Ruja, Sebastian, nor Jua knew how to do it. Then it was decided to contract with a Bulgarian IT firm that, with the help of Indian developers, copied the original Bitcoin blockchain and added a few customizations to make the blockchain their own. And it was also to decide how big OneCoin had to be. And Ruja decided. OneCoin was to consist of 2 billion and 100 million coins, which is 100 times the size of Bitcoin. In July 2014, when Sebastian was supposed to speak at a Bitcoin event in South Korea, he just didn't show up, and a few hours later sent John a picture of himself in a hospital room saying he was very sick. In fact, John was simply ditched, not deeming it important to end the partnership officially. The launch of the blockchain was planned for January 2015, but Ruja wanted to start selling right away. So Sebastian and Jua had to call their acquaintances and former colleagues, specialists, and reputable NLM sellers, offering them to make history, quit everything they had sold before, and join the new promising company OneCoin. Some thought the idea was dubious, and some still agreed. Nigel Allen, Per Carlson, and Petri Galil were among the recognizable NLM personalities who responded. Nigel was a British promoter in his 50s and had worked in the NLM field since the 1980s, including for several leading companies including Herbalife. Per and Petri were also NLM salesmen, both in their early 30s and living in Scandinavia at the time. All three were familiar with Jua in one way or another. There was one problem. In 2014, OneCoin was so new that no one knew if it would be considered a real product or not. And Jua and Sebastian's plan was to sell education. The OneCoin product that the promoters were supposed to sell was 5 educational packages that consisted of instructional videos and long PDFs, tips and information about finance, investing, and cryptocurrency. Also included in each package were free OneCoin coins. The cheapest package was the starter package, which cost €100. It came with 1 educational PDF file and 1,000 tokens, which could be turned into about 200 coins. There were 5 packages in total, each more expensive than the previous one. The most expensive one cost €5,000 and included all the previous educational files and 48,000 OneCoin coins. Although it was claimed that the educational packages were intended for those who want to bring their trading skills to the highest level, the information there was practically useless. In reality, investors were buying coins that were essentially worthless. So there was no public blockchain yet, but Nigel, Per, Petri, and Jua had already started selling these packages by the end of August 2014. They were working hard, but most reasonable people weren't interested in buying coins that didn't even exist yet. The first presentation of OneCoin took place on September 27, 2014 in Helsinki. By that time, only 27 packages had been sold, mostly to investors from Sweden or Finland. Then Ruja moved to more decisive action and said that if Per could convince at least 50 people to attend the presentation, she would personally fly in from Bulgaria to make the presentation. Somehow Per succeeded, and the presentation took place. Although the participants doubted the reality of Ruja's plan, they were buoyed by her self-confidence and belief in herself and her product. After the Helsinki event, rumors about the new cryptocurrency began to spread and more interest was generated. Ruja and Sebastian continued to promote their currency, perfecting the concept of Bitcoin and increasingly convincing people of the project's success. Although the coin still technically didn't exist, Sebastian told them that when the blockchain launched in January 2015, there would also be a currency exchange site called OneExchange, where OneCoin coins could be exchanged for euros at €0.50 per coin. He also persuaded to invest €5,000 now to get 24,000 within 3 months. The listeners loved it. They didn't want to miss out on the new cryptocurrency the same way they once missed out on Bitcoin. As planned, the Genesis blockchain was launched in January 2015. The currency had its own blockchain, and investors' accounts were to receive their coins within the next 1 or 2 days. In addition, the OneExchange was ready to launch. Each coin was worth €0.50 as promised by Sebastian, and coins could now be exchanged for real money. However, fearing that investors would immediately withdraw large amounts of euros and that the money in the company's accounts might not be enough for all the payouts, Ruja set a temporary limit on the amount that could be withdrawn weekly. To maximize publicity for herself and her company, Ruja engaged in self-promotion. In the summer of 2015, around the time when OneCoin released a premium trader package worth €12,500 and the company's revenue exceeded €1 billion, Ruja's photos appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine under the headline Cryptocurrency of Bulgarian Origin, and on a 2-page spread Ruja talked about the future of finance and the coming crypto revolution. Forbes is one of the most famous business magazines where all aspiring entrepreneurs dream of getting into. Ruja succeeded, but there was one but. The publication was not quite real. Through Forbes Brand Voice, a specialized PR company, Ruja acquired the opportunity to publish advertisements on 3 pages of the Bulgarian edition of the magazine and developed an article that looked indistinguishable from a real Forbes article, including the layout of the front page. The only difference from the real U.S. edition was that the cover of the U.S. edition of Forbes featured pop icon Katy Perry on the cover of the month's edition. Ruja, on the other hand, paid to simulate the U.S. edition of Forbes. A few months later, Ruja repeated the trick with an even more respected business publication, The Economist. Also in November 2015, she managed to become a keynote speaker at a large conference organized by the magazine in downtown Sofia, attended by local influencers, including Bulgarian President Rosen Plevneliev. In May 2015, another OneCoin presentation took place in Dubai. This time it was announced that OneExchange would be replaced by an independent exchange site, XCoinX, which would buy and sell OneCoin in parallel with Bitcoins, and the starting price of one OneCoin coin would be €1. Ruja said that once XCoinX is open, people will be able to cash out their coins on an open, independent market. The OneCoin Corporation continued to grow, and it was safe to say that Ruja had finally realized her potential. OneCoin was everything to her. She had more money than she could spend and absolute control over a huge growing company. After graduation, Ruja worked tirelessly, and now, after OneCoin took off, she decided she wanted to become a mother. Ruja was due to have a baby in the late fall of 2016 after she answered to the court for a 2009 to 2010 phablet scam. Until that happened, she kept the company busy. And the bigger and richer OneCoin became, the more often there were problems with the preservation and transfer of money. If the amount of money transferred was too large, banks froze transactions, and Ruja dramatically increased the number of new accounts. Among other things, she owned several personal and corporate accounts in the Emirates. But when OneCoin's growth became exorbitant, some banks got nervous. OneCoin's corporate accounts at Al Mashriq Bank suddenly started receiving millions of unexplained monthly payments from companies with strange names like Swift Electronics Limited and World Creation Electronics Limited, and then the money just as quickly disappeared. In May 2015 alone, Sebastian Greenwood was paid €9.5 million, and another €5 million went to royal yachts and boats. In September, Mashreq Bank filed a suspicious transaction report with the UAE Central Bank, and a few weeks later, Commercial Bank Dubai did the same. On September 14, 2015, Ruja told Sebastian that about €50 million had been frozen in Dubai. But as always, Ruja had a solution. Around the same time, she flew to Dubai to meet a member of the Sharjah royal family, an acquaintance of one of the richest men in the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Saad bin Faisal Al Qasimi. With the latter, Ruja struck a deal. She sold the Sheikh OneCoin Limited and 3 checks from Al Mashreq Bank, totaling 210 million Emirati dirhams, about €50 million. And in return, Al Qasimi gave Ruja 4 USB drives containing Bitcoin worth about €48.5 million over the course of several months. This was probably done so that Al Qasimi, thanks to his connections, could take over the company and unfreeze Ruja's assets for himself, while she had access to digital money that she could use immediately. A few months later, Al Qasimi actually wrote to the Dubai Attorney General explaining that Ruja's bank accounts had been frozen for no good reason, that he had power of attorney over them, and that the whole thing was an insult to Ruja. Gilbert Armento was in banking, owned his own 2 investment companies, Zala Group and Fates, as well as a controlling interest in a small independent bank called JSC Capital in Georgia. By mid-2010, he was involved in finance, including providing prepaid cards for companies and payment solutions for online casinos. In 2015, he began providing banking services for Ruja as well. Gilbert opened business accounts in his name that received payments from OneCoin investors and used his own bank, JSC Capital, to provide promoters with prepaid cards to pay their commissions. So Ruja also asked Gilbert to find someone to help her manage her rapidly growing personal wealth. Gilbert suggested Mark Scott as a candidate. Mark was a Florida corporate lawyer with whom Gilbert had worked several years earlier and was on reasonably good business and friendly terms. Ruja wanted her money to turn into assets, company stock, funds, or real estate. She wanted to do more than just own bank accounts, and Mark could help her do that. Mark proposed the creation of 4 investment funds. Mark's firm Lock Lord also additionally managed real estate transactions for Ruja. On February 9, 2016, Mark and Ruja met in person for the first time to discuss the Finero funds, as Mark called them, comprising 4 $100 million funds, 3 of which were registered in the British Virgin Islands and 1 in the Caymans. The funds invested in technology companies in the EU, mostly the UK and Ireland. Although it was Ruja's money, her name did not appear in the company's documents. Instead, the Finero funds were owned on paper by an investment management firm founded by Mark called NSSI International Consulting BGI, owned in turn by NSS International Consulting, a Florida company that Mark had owned for many years. In addition, several other subsidiaries were planned, each of which, like each fund, would have its own bank account and be controlled by Mark. Funds like Finero existed in large numbers in the British Virgin Islands, which imposed certain rules on the funds. For example, all funds had to appoint an independent administrator to ensure that they were professionally managed and that the interests of investors were protected. One of the administrators was Paul Spendiff, whose company Apex has managed thousands of investment funds around the world. Mark, on the other hand, had recently become an approved fund manager in the British Virgin Islands, which meant he could conduct business without going through lengthy approval procedures. Mark told Paul that the investors in Finero's new fund were wealthy European families he had worked with before. Once Apex opened bank accounts at Dionys Bank in the Cayman Islands for Finero and a background check was passed, Ruja could start sending money into one of the fund's bank accounts, which she did almost immediately. On June 2, 3 separate payments of €5 million were transferred to the account of Finero Equity Investments LP. Then on June 3, 6, 7, 8, 15, and 20, another €5 million each day. This continued throughout the summer. Over the course of 2 years, OneCoin investors bought packages ranging from 100 to 12,500 euros and diligently sent their money to various bank accounts around the world. Much of this money was now being collected in sums of 5 million euros each and sent to an investment fund in the Caribbean. This was Ruja's way of withdrawing the funds away from prying eyes and then hiding them in real estate, stocks, and other investment instruments. On May 30, 2016, Ruja celebrated her 36th birthday. That evening, dozens of impeccably dressed people gathered outside the rented Victoria and Albert Museum on the famous Exposition Road in South Kensington. Only 150 of OneCoin's several hundred thousand employees had received an invitation. Among the guests were those closest to Ruja, including her parents and her brother Konstantin, whom Ruja last saw a few years ago. Konstantin noticed the change in his sister and also couldn't help but notice that there was an emptiness among the guests at the party. Everything they talked about was somehow related to money, social status, and work. These people did not meet each other to socialize and genuinely have fun at a birthday party, but to discuss business or find new promising opportunities for themselves. In the midst of the celebration, and to be more precise, already closer to the night, a 5-story golden birthday cake with a crown and the inscription, "Happy Birthday, Cryptocurrency Queen," was brought out. And singer Tom Jones took to the stage for a private concert for which he was paid a small fortune. A few days after the party, Ruja called Konstantin and offered to be her personal assistant. She said that his job would be to arrange travel, meetings, handle the accounts, and transport her purchases. It was also a chance for Konstantin to spend more time with his parents, who were now with Ruja. On June 11, 2016, another OneCoin conference took place, which later became fatal. On that day, Ruja announced that the company was growing too fast. There were not enough coins for all those who wanted to buy them, and therefore a new, larger blockchain had to be created and all the data had to be moved there. But creating too many coins could lead to their depreciation and the value of investors' coins falling. And so Ruja promised to launch the new blockchain by October 1, while keeping the price of the coins the same and doubling the number of coins in the accounts of existing investors. Ruja also promised that OneCoin would become the new Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin itself would be forgotten in a couple of years. As announced, Ruja Ignatova publicly launched and demonstrated the new OneCoin blockchain on October 1, 2016. Thousands of investors watched the changing numbers on the screen, then double the amount of coins in their OneCoin accounts, and the fact that the price per coin was still just under 7 euros. The public, little versed in the nuances of cryptocurrency and the technical details of blockchain, was fascinated. The only problem was that people did not yet realize how this supposed wealth could turn out for them. At the same time, one of Norway's top IT professionals, Bjorn Jerk, was considering a job offer at OneCoin. On September 29, 2016, he was offered to create a blockchain for the rapidly growing cryptocurrency, which sounded absolutely nonsensical since there could be no existence of cryptocurrency without this technology. Something about this situation was definitely not right, and Bjorn declined the offer to collaborate. And a few months later, he came across OneCoin's promoter again, remembered the strange request addressed to him, and decided to take the company to the clean water, saying that the currency hardly has a blockchain. So what really happened to OneCoin? Because the cryptocurrency spread too fast, in mid-2015, just 6 months after the official launch of the first blockchain, the 2 billion coins created by Ruja began to run out. And after some more time, the company started selling non-existent coins to investors, the number of which kept growing. Ruja realized this, and it should have suspended coin sales and waited for its blockchain to catch up. But even at a rate of 10,000 coins every 10 minutes, it would take the blockchain about a year to create the 1 billion coins that investors had already bought. And it would have destroyed the company as a whole. And Ruja didn't want that. She was too used to her beautiful life and didn't want to lose it, even though she could just admit that she made 2 big promises. Throughout the winter of 2015, She searched for a way to combine real coins and fake coins, and by the end of the year she came up with that new blockchain. But she didn't take into account that old records couldn't be edited or new ones added to them, which meant that the idea was a failure and no new blockchain could be created. And the only person who in theory could have tried to do it, Bjorn Dirk, gave up. No new blockchain existed. Already mentioned Bjorn, realizing that the founder of OneCoin was deceiving almost the whole world, decided to find proof that the blockchain did not exist. And in fact, he succeeded. Unlike Bitcoin, OneCoin's transactions were hidden from prying eyes and could only be seen by Ruja and her closest subordinates. However, there was a tiny so-called blockchain display on the currency's website that showed real-time transactions between OneCoin wallets as they occurred. That got Bjorn thinking, and over the course of a few weeks, he sent coins between his accounts in certain combinations of numbers. First, for example, he sent 3 coins from one of his accounts to another. That transaction should have gone through on that blockchain mapping on the website, but it didn't. There were absolutely any alleged coin transfers, but this particular transfer did not happen. So Bjorn checked some more for a while, entering easily distinguishable coin combinations, but those transactions also didn't show up on the blockchain. This could only mean one thing: the publicly displayed transactions had absolutely nothing to do with reality. It was a fake, pre-programmed script that performed fake and meaningless transactions between imaginary wallets. It also explained how Ruja could so easily double the number of coins or change them to any other number, and proved that the price per one coin was based on absolutely nothing. By early 2017, when the supposed new blockchain was launched, things were going well enough. People were checking their wallets as before and believing in their rich future. But on January 13, something went wrong. When thousands of OneCoin investors around the world logged in, instead of the familiar page, they found an alarming message that the site was undergoing maintenance and that the exchange site XCoinX was undergoing a system upgrade that should supposedly take the currency to the next level. The strange message alerted investors and started to cause panic and suspicion in some, as the existence and functioning of the exchange site has always been proof that OneCoin has real value. Now something was going wrong. Some investors tried to find out what was going on through their managers they were working with, but they advised not to worry, saying that it was just a glitch. But in reality, they didn't understand anything themselves. And other investors were convinced by the closing of XCoinX that the OneCoin system was a scam. In addition, some watched Bjorn Dirk's videos or read his articles where he debunked OneCoin. But despite all these unfortunate factors, someone still continued to believe in OneCoin, because this fraudulent scheme was very cleverly built on manipulation of common human desires, faith, greed, and fear of missing out on profits. And although the investors themselves became victims, they are also to blame for such a massive spread of OneCoin, because they sold the currency to everyone they could sell it to: friends, relatives, acquaintances. People wanted to believe, and Ruja encouraged this self-deception, always making sure that any bad or suspicious news was accompanied by a new flashy announcement. And so, when XCoinX shut down, she had 2 new projects to reduce the negativity of investors, which she unveiled on January 15. First, OneCoin was to be the first cryptocurrency to be listed on a major stock exchange, meaning regular people could start buying stock options in the company, which was done through an initial public offering. And secondly, OneCoin launched a new e-commerce platform called DealShaker, where investors could spend their coins in exchange for real physical products.
However, what investors discovered when they first logged into DealShaker in February 2017 was very far from what they had envisioned. In fact, it was a regular online store where anyone who wanted to accept OneCoin as payment could sign up and start selling, but almost every so-called seller was just a OneCoin promoter, and there were only a few hundred products for sale. If an investor did manage to find what they wanted or needed, OneCoin charged a commission of up to 25%, and the price on the product or service was grossly inflated.
Overall, Daleshaker was one of the worst e-commerce sites ever on the internet, but investors didn't see it that way, nor did they find the non-existent blockchain and withdrawal restriction on going suspicious. So people continued to log on to Daleshaker every day and exchange OneCoin coins for items they didn't really need. OneCoin continued to exist, though no longer in its original form. As for Ruja Ignatova herself, the cryptocurrency queen paid little attention to work during this time and was focused on herself. The birth of the child changed Ruja a lot. She became softer in communication and restrained, although usually was cold and ruthless. She began to come to business meetings unprepared. Instead of sales plans, discussed kindergartens and showed pictures of her daughter. Now she had a child to think about, and she didn't care much about the company's problems, although a year ago she would have enjoyed solving them and fighting the competition. Ruja also became more nervous and paranoid that danger was waiting for her everywhere. There were more and more account difficulties because there was more and more money and suspicious financial transactions, and banks had to block cards and accounts. She had accumulating problems with business, money, needed to pay proper attention to her daughter. Ruja tried to reduce her official powers and discreetly leave OneCoin. It was impossible to do so. So at one of the company's large-scale events, held in Lisbon on October 7, 2017, Ruja simply did not show up. She stopped answering calls and texts and just disappeared. Apart from business and family, Ruja was concerned about love relationships. As we already know, she was married to Bjorn Strell since her university days. By 2017, he had a career as a respected real estate lawyer in Frankfurt, and although he didn't like the limelight and tried to stay away from OneCoin, he enjoyed his wife's success and attended events she hosted. Ruja didn't like to talk about her personal life, but it was likely that the need to run a multi-billion-dollar international company complicated her relationship with Bjorn. In the summer of 2017, the situation was made worse by Ruja's crush on Gilbert Armenta. What started as a fleeting romance in 2015 gradually grew into something more, and after spending most of July and August together at Ruja's Sozopol mansion, the couple seriously talked about getting a divorce and moving to London. But before taking that risk, Ruja wanted to be sure Gilbert was as committed to the relationship as she was. Something made her doubt, and sometimes she wondered if Gilbert was only with her for the money. At the end of August 2017, Ruja approached Frank Schneider, a former spy who was in charge of her security and whom she trusted. She asked him to check if Gilbert was really going to divorce his wife. Frank used the most primitive but effective way of obtaining information: listening to conversations, installing the appropriate device in Gilbert's apartment. In September, Ruja received recordings of private conversations between Gilbert and his wife Basi, from which it was clear that he was not going to leave his wife. And moreover, she had suspicions that the wife was aware of what was happening, but this was not proven. What was proven, however, was that Gilbert was in trouble with the law, as the FBI had charged him with extortion, however, unrelated to Ruja. But if the FBI was following Gilbert, it could get to the Ruja itself and expose it sooner or later. That's what she was worried about. In 2015, when OneCoin money first started flowing into his various bank accounts, Gilbert had to transfer it to his JSC bank in Polisi, from where he processed weekly commission payments for the promoters. One of the companies he invested in was Viola, a British firm run by businessman Christopher Hamilton that specialized in online payments. Gilbert invested in several tens of millions of dollars between 2015 and 2016. Some of the money came from an account unknown to Hamilton. He called Gilbert asking for an answer as to where the money came from, but the answer didn't come in time. Within 24 hours, Viola's bank froze his account and soon filed a suspicious activity report with UK authorities. The London police began investigating Christopher Hamilton, and a short time later became interested in Gilbert as well. On April 21, 2016, Christopher was arrested. However, a judge ruled the arrest unlawful and ordered Hamilton's money to be returned to him. The story did not end there, and according to Hamilton himself, once the judge gave the said order, Gilbert Armented demanded that Christopher send the money back to one of Gilbert's banks in Belize or Georgia. Christopher, however, was only willing to send the money to the accounts of Zola Group or Fates, which were also owned by Gilbert. Around August 2017, Gilbert hired a former Marine to follow Christopher and send out intimidating messages about the debt. Still, Christopher won that confrontation and Gilbert agreed to send money to Zola or Fates, but it was too late. The FBI found out about the situation and Gilbert was charged with extortion on September 12, 2017, and arrested a few days later and immediately agreed to cooperate. Ruja had good reason to be wary, and that's why she decided to run away. Shortly after Gilbert's arrest, she asked her brother Konstantin to book a flight for her to Vienna for October 25, 2017. Konstantin didn't understand what was going on and Ruja didn't answer any questions. The next day, she changed her mind and asked to book a flight to Athens, where she ended up going. At 7 a.m. on October 25, 2017, Ruja and her security chief boarded a plane to Athens, and then Ruja disappeared. The security chief returned to Sofia alone. Among other things, Ruja took with her a lot of money stolen from the company and funds. Thus, according to the analysis of bank statements, Ruja started moving huge sums as early as the end of 2016. First, she transferred about 6 million euros to the Bulgarian company LBJ. Then 51 million was invested in the Bulgarian tobacco company Openmark, which needed money to open a new factory in Thessaloniki, and then about 185 million euros were sent from the accounts of Fenero Funds to the accounts of Phoenix Funds Dubai, a horse racing fund based in Dubai. By the end of spring 2017, the Fenero funds were almost completely empty. In just over a year, tens of thousands of small OneCoin investments, mostly tycoon trader packages worth 5,000 euros and premium trader packages worth 12.5 euros, were disguised as large subscriptions by wealthy Europeans to a regulated fund and converted into a mix of stocks, real estate, and businesses, which eventually ended up in Ruja's personal possession. Also in 2015, she had a deal with a UAE sheikh who gave her Bitcoin worth 48.5 million euros, and one Bitcoin was worth just over 200 euros at the time. Later, the price of one Bitcoin rose first to 5,000 euros and then to 40,000. Thus, Ruja had about 230,000 Bitcoins, which in terms of euros was more than 9 billion. Since June 2018, Konstantin had to take over OneCoin. He tried to manage the company and resolve issues, and was arrested on March 6, 2019. Konstantin's mother and fiancé hired him the best lawyer they could find. He turned out to be Jeffrey Lichtman. After studying the case file, Lichtman said that Konstantin should plead guilty and cooperate with the investigation. Konstantin agreed, realizing that he had no other choice. Ruja, in the meantime, continued to skillfully hide. There were many rumors about her whereabouts, and it seemed that she continued to secretly manage the company. Because OneCoin continued to work, non-existent coins continued to be sold, although formally the whole top of the currency had long ago disappeared. Someone also believed that Ruja could have changed her appearance with the help of plastic surgeries, dyeing herself blonde and changing her name. One possibility for her fate was that she was killed back in November 2018 on the orders of Bulgarian drug lord Christoforos Amanatidis, also known as Taki. According to a report by Bulgarian website Ruja Ignatova was murdered aboard a yacht in the Ionian Sea, and her body was dismembered and thrown overboard. The alleged motive for the murder was to cover up the drug lord's involvement in the OneCoin scam. It is said that the drug lord is currently residing in Dubai, having fled from the Bulgarian authorities. Although there is no direct evidence for this version, it cannot be ruled out at all. Another version was the whereabouts of Ruja in Dubai, where she ended up after the flight to Athens and Bulgaria. But in Bulgaria were investigative actions, and Ignatova, realizing that there is not safe, decided to move to Dubai. This option explained why neither Vesk's mother nor Konstantin was worried about the former cryptocurrency queen. They knew she was safe. Later, there was confirmation of this hypothesis. On the page of Konstantin in social networks was posted his photo from allegedly Ruja's mansion in Dubai, and shortly before the arrest of the man in his computer was found a power of attorney signed by the disappeared Ruja, actually after her disappearance. The published photo helped to establish the exact address of the mansion's location, but the problem was that it was located in a heavily guarded private area that was almost impossible to get into. In early 2021, when a possible raid on the Dubai mansion was being decided, an anonymous source told police that someone had seen Ruja Ignatova on a boat in the Mediterranean in 2019, but could not remember when or where exactly. Soon it was reported that Ruja was seen in the summer of 2019 near Saint-Tropez in France. She was moored at sea on a large yacht and occasionally came ashore on a speedboat. Currently, Ruja Ignatova's whereabouts remain unknown. She is still wanted, and her closest subordinates have been arrested and, for the most part, have agreed to cooperate with the investigation. As for the money of deceived investors, their money left them with ends and forever. And even those who believed in OneCoin to the last gradually took off their rose-colored glasses and realized that they owned a currency that was essentially worthless, since they could not cash it out. Suddenly, everything became so obvious: scamming, siphoning off money, trusting empty words.